Is there any crazier stories about developing this game? Because I know the studio, like working in the video game space at that time, was kind of the wild wild west, and I maybe wasn't as structured and corporate as it is today. Or you said you don't have a meeting for 6 months. I mean, find a corporate American job today where where that's a possibility. Is there any crazy
Yeah,
stories from that time and crunches and deadlines and?
there were there were more crazy stories with the sequel for the game, uh, or rather expansions of the game. We so the company was concurrently developing two product lines. There was Heroes of Might and Magic, which was the turn-based strategy game, and Mind Magic, which was the role-playing game, both set in the same universe. And if anything, probably the Mind Magic role-playing game was a lead product of our studio. It was the A product, and Heroes of Might and Magic was the B product. Um, and so we would look at what they were doing in the next Might and Magic, and then kind of take away from that in doing Heroes of Might and Magic. And even though it was a fantasy game, the Might and Magic universe was a fantasy universe. There was actually a science fiction element to it, in that all these fantasy creatures were really the products of science fiction technology. And so to emulate what they were doing over on the role playing game side, in one expansion, we we incorporated science fiction elements. So we would have dwarves with ray guns, and minotaurs with jetpacks, and nagas that were integrated into tanks. So huge science fiction element. And so we were in the early conceptual phases, and our marketing director came up to me and said, "Do you have any artwork I can show the fans, because they want to see what's going on?" So I went and reached down to the pile of concept art we had. All right, show this. And unfortunately, I made an error not choosing things a little bit more carefully, because some of the concept art was a little less family friendly
Oh,
in some of its depictions of female characters than the final product would have been. So when the next day, when that concept art was released online, there was an outcry from the fans about, here, how dare we mix science fiction with their fantasy, and how dare we make this a not family friendly game. And within a couple of days, they were launching a boycott of it.
when was Heroes ever a
And
family game? I'm confused about that part of the sentence. I guess
well,
there's so many elements of
it's
Heroes: demons, dragons. Like getting burned alive by a dragon. Like there's so much, right?
well, the thing about Americans, we're a little bit more accepting of violence than we are of sexuality.
Ah, that makes
So
sense. Sure.
I think that's what it was. If we had released this in Europe, no problem, strictly. But this was American audiences, so uh, so and of course, I knew what we were going to be doing would be cool, and I want to just be patient, tell the fans it's going to be okay, slowly convince them over to our side. But management freaked out, and they told us to cancel.
Oh my
Uh,
god.
cancel this expansion and come up with something new. So we came up with something that I think was, I think that's where we came up with an elemental town, instead of a science fiction oriented town. So yeah, so under orders, we changed our plans. I got to tell you, years later, I've heard some fans say, that science fiction town would have been really cool, and yeah, would have been,
Sure.
nice. And it was an expansion after all. It wasn't part of the main game. It was something you add on, you could buy if you wanted to. But no, I thought we caved too easily to that. So that's probably the weirdest thing that went on.
Looking back at the time when this game came out, it kind of makes sense as to why there was so much outrage about this. Because I remember talking to Sandy about his Doom release in 1993, and there was a big government effort to talk about violence in video games, and the government was basically painting games as like this evil that we have to stop children from playing. So it kind of makes sense, I guess, where this mob mentality, against the studio would come from.
That was around the time that what Mortal Kombat came out.
Doom 1993, 1991, 92, like in the early 90s, that's when like there was a government kind of in the US, I believe, kind of clamping down on violence in video games, right?
Yeah, there was a couple of senators. It was
right. I think Hillary Clinton was also in there. I can't remember, some big politician.
A little bit, but not as much. Not as much as boy. Their names are on the tip of my tongue. I certainly should know it.
No worries.
But yeah, they basically challenged the video game industry. They said, you either regulate yourselves or we're going to regulate you. So that's when we came up with the SRB and the rating system. Yeah, Mortal Kombat in 1992.
Yeah, around that time. That makes sense.
It was around that time. Now this was actually Heroes of Might and Magic. So this was like 6-7 years later, afterwards. But yeah, there was still a sensitivity about violence in games at that time. But yeah, we weren't really hit for the violence. In fact, Heroes of Might and Magic was not a very graphic game
at all.
It was
very tame.
I mean, graphic to violence. It was very tame in that way. No, it was more of the sexuality that was the feared sexuality of having large-breasted female characters in the game, which no, we would not have put in. It was just that one particular artist who happened to do that concept art, just happened to draw it that way.
Unlucky.
Was not final. But yeah, again, my fault for not being a better editor in what we were showing to our fans of what we were working on.